And ladies and gentlemen, that was the official launch of Will AI Dictate the Future? I'm now going to get the hotel to serve afternoon tea as we nourish our stomachs as well as nourish our minds with our panel discussion, The Future of AI and Its Impact. And we've got a really, really awesome panel, as you can see on stage. The panel will be moderated by Professor the Honourable Stephen Martin. It will also feature Mr. Shawn Huang, Member of Parliament Singapore, Dr. Anton Ravindran, who's of course the author of Will AI Dictate the Future, Dr. Kiat, Chairman of Goodwins Law Corporation, and Professor Venky, Shankararaman, Vice Provost, Singapore Management University. We are also going to be joined on screen by Professor Andy Koronios, CEO and MD SmartSat CRC in Australia, as well as Professor Liz Bacon, Vice Chancellor, Abertay University in the UK. Can you hear us to my online guest? All good? Ladies and gentlemen, with that, please enjoy afternoon tea. I'm going to hand the time over to Professor Martin right now to start our panel discussion entitled The Future of AI and Its Impact. Let's give them all a big round of applause.
Well, thank you, and here we go. To my colleagues that are beaming in, hello. Good to see you both, and thank you for joining us here today. Anton, I couldn't help but wonder as I was watching that video, where was Arnold Schwarzenegger? And some of those movies of years gone by, AI, The Terminator, and so on. Why this book now, and why on AI?
Thank you, Stephen. Firstly, we all know, and this is digital native citizens here, that AI is an integral part of our life today. I say that because if you look around your mobile phones, today the world is about 87%, and in Singapore it's much higher, carries a mobile phone. And the number of applications that we use on mobile phones are an integral part of our lives. And many of these applications are driven by AI. Same thing applies to any social media platform. They all are driven by AI. Everything that what we do, what we see, what is captured is driven by AI. But the point is, it is not AI in your hands only. It's in our homes, it's in our roads, it's in our hospitals, it is in our factories, it's the pacemaker that we have, it is the aircraft in the sky, even rockets to the moon and back. The point again is it has proliferated in every walk of life, both on Earth and in the space. It is probably, as I said earlier on, one of the most profound technological development ever in the history of mankind. I'll tell you why, and I'm sure many of you would know. Let's roll back 20 years ago and think about when we celebrated the sequencing of DNA, the blueprint of our DNA. The world celebrated for the first time in the history of mankind, we were able to have a blueprint of our own DNA. And for that, it took about 13 years. And even we celebrated for that because it was actually earlier than expected in completion and spent $500 million. But today, roll forward 20 years, we can do that DNA sequencing within 24 hours. It took us 13 years to get there, $500 million, and today we can do that within 24 hours. And it serves many purposes. Another thing, few statistics to share why AI is so important and what made us write this book. The other thing today is proliferation of handheld devices that are connected. There's about 30 billion of them today. And it's growing by leap and bounds, and it is increasing by about 1 million a week. And that also means that the enormous amount of data that is being created, captured, stored, and processed. And let me give you another figure again on that. 10 years ago, it was only about 2 zettabytes of data. Roll forward, today we are about 65 to 70. And in about 5 years, it's going to be 200 zettabytes. It's a tenfold increase within 10 years. That is the amount of data that we have gathered. 30 billion devices, the amount of data. I don't want to labor too much. What is driving this AI and why AI now? AI has been around for 6 decades, but only in the last 5 years, the growth exploded. And the last point is, if you look around, the number of autonomous vehicles, etc., is accelerating. The number of page makers, before I pass it back, is that the world is also finding a huge divide, socio-political, economic divide, because of that. The World Economic Forum predicts, the study says that if we don't fill the shortfall in the skills gap within the next 4 years, this would have an impact of $11.5 trillion, I repeat, $11.5 trillion in global GDP within 5 years. And if not, we are going to miss that. They did a recent study on this not too long ago, just a couple of years ago. And the study found that 70% of the population, not necessarily in Singapore, it's a global study, that they didn't realize that they are experiencing AI. Another 50% said that they fear or there is some level of anxiety and apprehension about AI. And then again, another 20% said that they really think that AI is going to take over the world. And that warrants us to write a book. It is clearly warrants us to write a book. And last point I want to add is AI is far more than consumer devices, far more than our factories, far more than the cars on the streets. We are, for the first time in human history, we are trying to do 2 major things by leveraging AI. One is to understand the origins of the universe. And there are major studies going on, and I don't have the time to elaborate. Some of it is in the book. And the other thing is also the origins of human species. And these 2 endeavors at least have been started, and there is adequate justification to believe that we have a chance at getting to some level of knowledge and information. So for various reasons, whether it's the impact on economy, the social political impact, the future AI, and there is a need for more books, not just this book. Thank you, Steve.
Always give the author some opportunity to expand on his work, and we've just heard from Anton very nicely. Thank you. Shawn, turning to you, we heard something of the technology transformation that's taking place in Singapore from the Minister. But is Singapore already living in an era of AI? And what's it doing for its residents here?
Stephen, thanks for the question. I don't know if everyone can hear me properly. So for AI, from the video, from the speeches, and from Dr. Anton's sharing, it's pretty clear that we are already in the era of AI. And most of the apps, most of the layers, application layers that we experience today actually reinforces that socio-economic relationship. It continues to build better social outcomes. It continues to build better economic outcomes. But I don't know whether that model today is overly simplistic and it does not sufficiently unlock the full capability of AI, especially in the advent of climate change and sustainability, and with our better knowledge of our biological layers, so better understanding of the natural environment, and personally our biological environment. And how does AI then supersede the capability of our knowledge of this very old definition of what society and economic relationship is? How can we further build the kind of power to understand interactions of all 4 domains, especially with better knowledge of our DNA, better knowledge of biological proteins that deliver certain capabilities, our emotional, psychological reactions, and how does it sense make our natural environment? So that's something that we continue to build on, and I think the government has to look into this, not just in Singapore as well, but also in the region.
Thank you. My fisherman friend here to the right, that's you.
That's me.
I understand that we have some senior lawyers with us here in the audience, and so this question might be a bit tricky, but do you think that AI will replace lawyers. And what are the reasons usually given for the prediction that AI will replace them? Don't panic, I'm sure this is a very good answer.
Thank you, sir, for that question. Well, just a spoiler, okay, for those of you who haven't read the book or the chapter. I wrote a chapter on AI and lawyers. I deliberately stayed away from AI and law because Anton has got a chapter on that, and there are far better people than I to talk about the issues of AI and its impact on law. Nonetheless, for those of you who are interested, the Singapore Computer Society, of which I'm the legal advisor, have got me to do several iterations of the legal aspects of AI and Industry 4.0 technology. So if you're interested, go see the Computer Society and maybe I can come do a full day seminar for you. But that's AI and law. Now the question is AI and lawyers, okay? Every one of us have got our favorite lawyer joke. And we want, Shakespeare says the first thing we do, we kill all the lawyers. So, yes, we all hope that lawyers will be replaced. And in fact, my first conclusion in one of the earlier paragraphs is, yes, AI will replace lawyers, but only in the repetitive, in the mundane, arcane, memorizing sort of data-based law. Because there's a lot of cases you have to remember, a lot of statutes you have to remember, and so my advocacy is, why pay lawyers to do it? You've got AI, get the AI to do it, and it's probably cheaper than your lawyer. So the other thing I advocate for in my chapter is that a lot of what we think is legal work is very, very low-level legal work. And my chapter argues that we should create a new profession, which is a paralegal profession. People who are trained enough in law to handle the legal aspects of your daily problems, but augmented, okay, and that's the word I used. AI will augment legal knowledge. And so your paralegal who's trained in low-level issues of law and knows some law can use AI to augment himself or herself so that he or she is a legal expert. And of course, the knowledge comes from a real legal expert who's put it into the system. And the machine has learned from that person. So what you do then is this paralegal is handling many of your mundane, domestic, perhaps low-level, low-cost legal issues and drafting. And so you save a lot of money on a lawyer. So what do we do with a lawyer? Well, we still need lawyers to do very complicated, complex deals, multinational, multi-jurisdictional deals and legal cases. Maybe at the International Criminal Court, when you bring Russia to the war crimes court, you need lawyers for those things. AI will still not do it. Even AGI, yeah, Dr. Anton, even AGI will not do that sort of thing. Now, one of the other things then, and with that I want to stop because I want to give time to my other friends too. But the other thing I have advocated for is actually the fact that we will need to do legal training very differently. Okay, it will not be pure deep law as we do now in SMU, NUS, SUSS, but we will probably be looking at cube-shaped lawyers. Okay, not because they're big and round, cube-shaped. Because currently we think of lawyers with specializations and we pay them a lot of money. As senior counsels, they're deeply in a silo of knowledge. And we need lawyers eventually who, because AI is going to do the legal part, that they will be useful to the law firms and to the clients because they are good with looking at not just legal issues, but a broad range of issues. So I'm very glad that, for example, SMU has just launched a program on integrative studies where you probably pick a few law subjects, a few computer subjects, a few emotional quotient, psychology. You would actually be looking at a lawyer trained in a broad range of knowledge, so that it is not so much what you know in law, but how you integrate all the human knowledge possible using the AI to augment your ability. So your cube is your breath is your law. You know, you are not a specialist in law, you're a generalist in law. You know everything, so the legal issues can be all, you go to one stop. And the other thing is the breadth, the length, and that's all your issues on emotions and all that. And finally then, emotions. Now, since the French Revolution, the Enlightenment, we all look down on emotions and say professionals should not be emotional. You should be professional. You know? My book, my chapter in this book argues that actually where AI is concerned, it has no emotions. That's bad. Because you need a judge, you need a lawyer with emotions. I'm so incensed about this injustice, I'm going to find a way out. And as a Lord Denning, as a Lord Atkin, I will find a legal issue, a legal principle, maybe draw together a few legal principles that are never in the database of anybody else. So AI will not be there, but the judge with the emotions who says, I will get this justice done. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a collective sigh of relief from the legal profession in the room. Could I invite one of our international participants now, Professor Andy Koronios. Andy, two-part question to you, and I'm looking forward because I can see you on the screen in front of me. How is AI used in space exploration and exploitation at the moment? And how do you think that's likely to change in the next 5 to 10 years? Thanks, Andy.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to speak to you. Congratulations on the launch of the book, and my apologies for not being able to be there in person. As you no doubt have noticed, colleagues, the global space industry has experienced recently a very rapid growth, mainly because of commercialization of space rather than governments building spacecraft by themselves, having private enterprise to help them. But at the same time also, because of miniaturization of electronics, significant computational power and storage, we have been able to move away from the large, complex and expensive spacecraft, and particularly satellites, to much more small, smart and many satellites, and therefore less expensive, which means we can actually launch a lot more than that. AI is playing a part in all the entire value chain of the whole design, testing, integration, manufacturing, launching and operations of the spacecraft, the satellites, the payloads, as well when it comes to looking down on Earth instead of going to other worlds, to the Moon and Mars and beyond. So in the design and manufacturing area, for instance, we are using a lot of data now, not just only to design the specifications, but also to design an entire virtual AI-enabled model of the satellite, a digital twin, if you like. We borrow this from Industry 4.0, and indeed we call it Space 4.0. All of that is AI-enabled to be able to actually not only see the satellite in the design and manufacturing stage and test it rigorously, because as you know, we only have one chance to launch it. You can't fix it if something went wrong, but then also to monitor it in an intelligent way. So not only in the manufacture and design of these, but in the space operations, AI is now enabling in the monitoring, in the analyzing telemetry data, in the positioning and navigation, and also starting to move towards traffic management. That's really the second order kind of AI where we will be able to do that. But also robotics, space robotics and automation, as no doubt you have already seen in many areas now, space robotics is well enabled by AI. The analysis of data, for instance, NASA has used the ExoMiner, which is a neural network system that parses huge volumes of data that comes from one mission, the Kepler mission, in their quest to map 200,000 stars, something that humans could not do without automation, without machine learning. And in that, using deep learning techniques, they've been able to get more than 300 new planets to actually add to the tally that they didn't know they existed before. No doubt, of course, you've seen the latest rover on Mars, Perseverance. That's very much AI-enabled. It uses AI-enabled navigation systems. You saw the dramatic landing of that, which was automated. And of course, you saw or at least if you've been following, you saw the AI-powered instruments that are very precise, and they are looking for traces of microscopic life on Mars. So all of these areas are enabled currently by AI. Of course, in 5 or 10 years' time, that's going to be orders of magnitude more advanced, because as you know, the growth of technology, and particularly this area now of artificial intelligence, is exponential in its nature. And therefore, the software that guide the next generation systems will be much more intelligent. The whole satellite system will be much more software defined, and therefore more AI enabled. And their space systems, as well as satellite systems, will be autonomous, intelligent, and cooperative. They will actually display swarm intelligence, what we call swarm intelligence. And that will be very, very important. Like your driverless cars on Earth, you will need to have AI-enabled systems so that they are controlled by themselves rather than being controlled from the ground, as is the case at the moment. There probably something like 7,000 or 8,000 satellites in orbit at the moment. Well, in the next 5 or 10 years, there will probably be nearly 100,000 satellites in orbit. That then means that the orbit will be, the whole of space around Earth will be very congested. There is no way that humans from the ground can actually control and avoid collisions. So collision avoidance systems of the next generation will be very much AI enabled, because as you might imagine, at the speeds that satellites are orbiting around Earth, if there is a collision, it actually develops fragments that will make more collisions, and then you'll have chaos in terms of space debris, which will make space unusable for us. So it is a very important area and a very important service that AI provides for space and space activity. And of course, in the same way as in space exploration, which, as you know, the space by itself and other worlds like the moon and Mars are very, very hostile, very harsh, certainly not very conducive to human life. In fact, even the astronauts on the moon, they could only survive 1 or 2 days on the moon. After that, the radiation would essentially kill them. It will destroy their suits. And therefore, AI-enabled robots will be the scouts of the future to actually explore those worlds and prepare those worlds before we can actually explore them ourselves and even colonize them. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Very much appreciate those comments. Could we perhaps look then at the education sector, and Professor Liz Bacon, as Vice-Chancellor of a distinguished university in Scotland, I guess through this coronavirus, COVID last couple of years, like Australian universities, you've seen changes that have been necessitated in terms of delivery of programs. I wonder then, with that experience, do you think that students are likely to be taught differently into the future? And secondly, where do you think AI will have the greatest impact over the next 5 to 10 years?
Thank you very much. So first of all, can I also offer my congratulations on the book? And I'm also sorry not to be with you today. Making predictions is always challenging. However, I think there will definitely be an impact in a couple of areas. So I think my first thought in the next 5 to 10 years, although long into the future, I suspect AI will simply take over an awful lot of the teaching. But I see very much a change in the personalisation of the learning experience. So artificial intelligence can already help students with their learning. For example, finding additional materials for students to practice in areas they find difficult before moving forward. You know, if a student clearly understands something, then again, AI can help students, you know, move forward with more challenging questions to tackle. You know, it can also help teachers mark already, perhaps only the first draft of the marking at the moment, but eventually it will probably just take that over. It really depends what effort you put into the training. But AI can certainly author an answer to a question, for example, writing an essay for a student, and it can also mark the answer. So you wonder, where does the student fit into this now if it can actually do the answer and mark it? So I think we will also see in education, not necessarily linked to AI, but different forms of assessment, more authentic, more application of knowledge. And dare I say, possibly in the presence of a teacher, as it's hard to know if a student has actually authored an answer with the support AI will give in future. So that's an area I think will be becoming more challenging over time. So I think university staff and educational staff need to rethink the design of our assessments based on how, you know, students will use their knowledge in the real world in future. But will they be taught differently? I hope so. Our approach for a long time has been very pragmatic and efficient, and it's really a one-size-fits-all approach. You know, we stand up in the classroom and we, you know, give teaching sessions. We have a very sort of fixed academic year cycle. It's administratively convenient to teach all students in a cohort at the same time, assess them at the same time. And of course, there's such benefits as doing group work and things, but scheduling classes is quite a complex problem. So we have an approach which works, but if you look at it from the learner perspective, that takes place at different times for different students. Students are ready to learn in different ways at different times during their lives. And we should think about how we reward learning whenever and wherever it occurs. It shouldn't be bounded by schedules. And I think that's where technology comes in. You know, students can have bite-sized chunks of learning that work for them as an individual, and that will be different for every student. I think one of the things that COVID has shown us is that technology can also be a great leveler. And one of the things that was a revelation for many students with disabilities or those with caring responsibilities, just the simple fact of not having to travel to campus, but having online sessions, recording of online sessions and things like that could be really transformational. Although I think there's still a huge number of benefits from the face-to-face learning, but we shouldn't lose the ground that we've gained during COVID. So ultimately, I think AI will help provide more personalised learning support and flexibility in how everybody learns. Of course, we might just all live in the metaverse in the future, but I'm talking 5 to 10 years. So I think that's where I think things are going at the moment for both teachers and students.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate that. Could I turn to Professor Venky? An area that's near and dear to my heart is financial services. I am responsible in Australia for a bank. Can you give us some examples where AI is being used in financial services now, and where might that go? I mean, are we likely to see greater scrutiny required because of the application of AI? Are regulators likely to take a greater emphasis in some of the examinations that they might undertake as well in financial services?
Thank you, Stephen. So I just was reflecting that, about 30 years ago, my PhD was in AI. And I was sitting in Turing Institute in Glasgow, and that's where I used to go to read. And at that time, this thing was okay. In the next 3 to 4 years, by the time I finish my PhD, AI will be everywhere. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Something else happened. The internet boom that was, took over. But then what has been happening is some of the AI promises that were there at that beginning stage, okay? A lot of it was on how do you capture knowledge from humans and encode it. So that's one of the reasons it didn't take off, because it's very difficult to actually capture that knowledge from the humans and encode it. But now when you look at AI, it's a lot about the data is already there and how we can use data and gain insights from it. So it's a more data-driven approach. And we all know there is a lot of data. So coming to financial services, when you look at applications in financial services, you can divide it into front office, middle office, and back office. So the front office application that's already being developed and launched in many digital bank apps is Digital Financial Advisor, right? So this advisor is able to give you advice in terms of where you should invest, what's your current state of financial health. So that kind of AI applications already exist. And some of them have implemented chatbots. So especially insurance companies, one of the problems is they're continuously launching new insurance plans. And for any consumer, it's very confusing which insurance plans is relevant for them, right? So these chatbot applications help to ask few questions and narrow down and give you some advice. So in the middle office, these are applications, so the front office applications are directly used by the consumer, people like us. The middle office applications, to a large extent, their AI is being applied so that it helps to enhance the efficiency of the bank officer in terms of the tasks that they are doing. So for example, when you have a new client, the bank officer would like to have some understanding of the risk level of this client before onboarding the client, whether it's a high risk, medium risk, or low risk. And here AI can be useful, right? And when you go to from the middle office, the back office, there to a large extent you don't see what's happening. And one example is algorithmic trading, where AI is already being used. And this is a lot of our money we put in investments, mutual funds, etc. And there is some AI bot which is deciding where to invest and keep moving your money, right? So there's a lot of challenges in terms of, as you highlighted, one of the big challenge is it's all dependent on the data. The machine learning is based on data. So if you don't give it the right data, then it's going to learn the wrong things. And that has a lot of implications. So for example, if you give it data, say, like a home loan application, right? So if you're going to give it data which to assess the credit worthiness of somebody before you give them a loan. And if you're only giving data about a specific lot of data containing, say, the race, right, of the person. And if it's only of specific race, then if somebody else in a different race is going to use the application, most likely it'll reject the loan. And, there is a bias there. So that data bias is, so a lot of effort has to be put into curating the data so that the data is representative of reality. And that's very important. Data management for banks has always been a challenge. But in the past, I would say it wasn't a very big challenge. The challenge was how do you capture the data, store it. And in the past, the data was not accessible to people outside the bank. Now you are allowing the access to your customers, you third-party partners the bank work with, like the fintech companies. So data security, data privacy becomes more important, right? And the way technology is changing is at a very rapid, change is happening. The problem is the regulations have to catch up with these changes. So that's one other issue. Because here in the past, when we did a lot of AI, a lot of work was done in research labs, producing some prototypes. It doesn't really affect people. But now a lot of AI is directly at the customer's end. So very easily things can go wrong, and that'll have a very negative impact on the particular organization.
Just as a quick follow-up, with the amount of data that's there, issues around privacy, issues around collection, if we're talking specifically in financial services, does that place a greater onus on governments and regulators to ensure that the financial institutions that are conducting this necessary business, I mean, economies can't function without the banking system. Does this mean, though, that there is added responsibility going to be on governments, on regulators, to ensure that that data that is collected through the AI processes that you've outlined is used appropriately? I mean, if I look at the Australian examples more recently, as I'm sure there are around the world, there's a few dodgy deals being done dirt cheap. And the implications for that have been quite severe, with multi-million-dollar fines being issued to banks by regulators. So how do we get around that specific matter about data collection and AI's application in particular?
So the role of the government, just like anything, that government can only do so much. Definitely, yes, there is a role for the government to play, but I also feel that they can put in a lot of regulations, but at the same time, if it's over-regulated, then it's going to affect the innovation, right? So there has to be some balance. And therefore, the individual organizations, I think, have to be more ethical and more moral. And in a capitalistic world, we don't control everything, but at the same time, you got to put in the necessary checks. So, in Singapore, MAS has come up with its own set of guidelines, as well as, principles that banks should follow. And it's important that the organizations will have to adopt this. But at the same time, yes, there will be fines, because there is always a slap on the wrist. And if you just let, and we have realized already with the, the financial impacts that have happened in the last few years, that if you don't control things, it can go hayway. So that's very important.
All right, well, thank you. I'm pleased to say that my bank is ethical, moral, and also financially very sound and profitable. So thank you for that. Could I perhaps then turn back to Dr. Anton while we are talking about these various applications of AI, and Anton, ask you just to make some comments about the implications for AI in the healthcare industry.
Thanks, Stephen. First, just want to comment on Professor Venky's comments about 30 years ago AI, and it was known as AI winter for some time. That was due to various reasons. I just want to clarify that and come back to Professor Stephen's question. AI has been around 60 years, and the transition in the last 5 years, I must stress that, being an AI sales guy today, is the fact that two things, among other things, is the computing power has grown exponentially. And let me put that in some perspective. CPU in the last 5 decades, according to reports, have grown by 1 trillion-fold. I repeat, CPU in 5 decades, 1 trillion-fold. That should answer the question why AI, it took so long to get here. Secondly, as I said earlier on in my speech, that the amount of data that has actually quadrupled exponentially from 2 zettabytes about 10 years ago to 65 zettabytes today. So that's the reason, part of the reason. Of course, academics, we have few here, some here, I'm sure. Professor Venky, Professor Liz, Professor Andy. Funding was also an issue for a long time in the 80s and 90s. But I will not dwell on it too much, but the things have changed in the last 5 years, whether it's processing power, whether it's the data, even the funding elements. Because today, AI is driven not by academia any longer, but the Googles of the world and Microsoft of the world and Amazons of the world. That wasn't the case in the 80s and 90s. Now, coming back to the question on healthcare, like every other industry, AI is a game changer. The healthcare industry is going through a huge transformation. It is the transformation for the following reasons. Number one, AI is doing far better job than the radiologist and the pathologist in reading images. And that's why today we can, and I earlier SMS Janil mentioned, that in split seconds we can diagnose diabetes by reading retina scans. We are spotting gastric cancer, prostate cancer, skin cancer, breast cancer, etc., just through AI only. So the oncologist plays a secondary role now. Now, the world is also aging, we all know that. By 2030, the world is going to have a population of 2.1 billion people over 60 years of age. And secondly, healthcare systems are burdened by lack of funding. So that is a double whammy. In the midst of that double whammy, we have e-medicine today. It is also because of AI, we can cut costs in many ways. The healthcare has transformed into something more of predictive medicine, preventive medicine, and personalized medicine, rather than in the past where you treat cases very differently. So the model is changing. And from a hospital utilization perspective, there are many AI tools from patient care management to hospital management to preventive medicine to predictive medicine, etc. From a drug recovery perspective, COVID is a classic example. Traditionally, over the years, over decades, generally it takes about 10 years and close to $1 billion to produce a drug for any disease. It takes 10 years, $1 billion, and the success rate is about 10%. Today, we have cut that into 1 year. The cost is much lower, and the accuracy rate and success rate and the efficacy rate is far better. So healthcare is being transformed, and AI is a game changer. I can go on. There's a whole list of things. Some of it is addressed in the book and in other books. Thank you.
Thanks, Anton. Look, I wanted to leave some time for some questions from our audience. So I'm going to ask each of our panellists if they wouldn't mind making perhaps a closing statement, but I'll give you a bit of direction as well if I possibly can. So, Liz, I wonder if, again, you might come back to this concept of how I might develop a new learning model for universities, for education more generally. Professor Venky, again, I think you've pretty much covered some of the significant issues associated with the financial services industry, but if there are any other comments you'd like to make, please, we'd love to hear those. Dr. Toe, again, legal education. Is there a need in the university sector, as we're training the lawyers of the future, to adapt AI a little better than that? Andy, I wonder if you might say something to us about the current geopolitical environment and whether or not AI is likely to accelerate something like Star Wars future scenarios. I'm not sure which Star Wars adventure we're up to at the moment, episode 311 or something like that, Steven Spielberg, but you might make some comments about that. And Shawn, whether perhaps you might be able to make some comments about the way in which the government here in Singapore sees the way in which AI will be most used in the next decade or so. And then finally, to our esteemed author, you can make comments on anything, Anton, but keep them short. Thank you. So can we go, perhaps if I start with our international guest first. Andy, if you wouldn't mind some concluding comments. Thank you.
As Professor Bacon said before, it's very difficult for anyone to predict the future, what might happen, but we can get some clues. And certainly what I know is that it is likely that the geopolitical environment and the way that humanity has behaved in the past, it is likely that as AI develops and it becomes at that level of, if you like, Star Wars technology, then that it could be used for Star Wars. As you know, a lot of the technologies, a lot of the motivations for doing anything, in fact, any major project, is because for preparation for war. You only have to look at your mobile phone to know that most of those technologies, including the internet, was very much a defense project of some type in its beginning. So it is likely that space will become another domain of war. In fact, it already is. The United States has a space force. Australia only last month established its own space force, and there'll be many others. And you might have seen in the media only as recently as last November, where Russia tested and demonstrated, in fact, an anti-satellite weapon, destroying its own inactive satellites, which caused a lot of consternation around the world because the fragments that it kind of produced will be there orbiting the Earth for a long time. And the fact that it is actually against the treaty, the Space Treaty of 1967, that prohibits the use of space for anything other than peaceful activities. So there is no doubt in my mind that as we progress, the technology will certainly be capable for a Star Wars scenario. I do hope, though, that technology will, in fact, as we build Star Wars civilizations, I hope that not only in space, but also on Earth, the development of AI will be, as we move towards singularity, will be putting humanity at the center, and any resulting technologies will have hardwired in it that it would be a force for good rather than a force for destruction. Thank you.
Liz, thank you.
So thank you very much. In terms of how AI might change the model of learning going forward, we've almost have heard the predictions around job automation, and I think as a result of that we need to rethink our approach to education. There's no question that people will have to, I think, do more frequent upskilling and reskilling, but there are deeper questions such as how will this take place, when and where will it take place, and given people are forecast to have multiple careers in future, not just multiple jobs, we need to think or rethink the core life skills that people need to launch their careers. And this has implications for all of education, but certainly for higher education. So, you know, one clear, obvious front runner would be what we call soft skills, team working, presentation, writing, and all the rest of it. But I think people's ability to use technology and work with technology, for example, learning to be a co-worker of a bot, or even cope with your boss being a robot. We need to teach students to adapt and to cope with just-in-time learning, however it's delivered, whether that's in the workplace, online, face-to-face. Students these days need to learn how to have a range of different environments and modes for study. And of course, all that will be supported by their digital friend or their digital assistant. So one question I've asked myself is whether the concept of a degree will survive, or will everything just be just-in-time learning? At the moment, I'm going to say yes, a degree will survive, certainly in the near future, and I'll explain why. I suppose partly because just-in-time learning tends to be very short-term skills, but I think people need time to develop their core skills and their skills to develop on the path for multiple careers, where they can then pick up and adapt new skills and build on their core base. So I think without some of those core critical skills like higher-level critical thinking, it might be difficult for students to do, but degrees will probably evolve. They probably will reduce in length. They may be taken more while working or doing other studies or have more intense bursts. We don't know. All of these might be possible, but I think the one key message for me is that one size doesn't fit all, and we need to offer a wider range of learning experience going forward, of course, all supported by technology. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Dr. Toh.
Right. Actually, before I answer the question about legal education, I had a comment, and Professor Venky mentioned regulation, and you asked about that. In terms of regulation, governments are very bad in predicting the technologies and the laws to pass. So many of us will remember that there was this exciting new technology called teletext, and the government of Singapore pumped in millions of dollars into it, non-starter. All right? Not that governments are bad, but lawyers and governments and human beings generally cannot predict the future. So if you were to regulate banks and make them very safe, in the new world we are going to be in, not just the metaverse, but even just simply blockchain technology, you're going to have banks disintermediated. And of course, you have a highly safe banking system nobody uses. So you regulate banks for what? Because they are going onto the blockchain. So, so we basically, in Singapore, the attitude is, and I mentioned in my chapter, that we work first on the ethics of it. So yesterday, I think Raju had an article in the Straits Times about morality, okay, in the metaverse. That's another story. But back then to our panel here. In terms of legal education, I would say there is a very clear need going forward for a profession called a legal technologist. All right. Essentially, a lawyer, maybe a law-trained person who knows the technology so well. You're going to be very useful running law firms or running corporations, in-house departments. You need a legal technologist who is very savvy with the technology. There's a second class that I mentioned of people that professionals you need to train, and that's a new profession of a paralegal who uses the technology to advise and help clients at very low levels, so the access to justice becomes far better and far cheaper. And then, of course, finally, when you train lawyers, you no longer need to train them deep in the law, argue for a generalist. So you train them generally in law so they can tie all the strings together for the clients, and then you give them more education in technology, computer programming, coding, business skills, accounting skills, and so on. So they will be far more useful to their clients. And essentially, I think my last statement is simply that the future is unknown, and we could be very wrong in predicting it.
Thank you for that sobering thought. Professor Venky.
Okay, so in terms of financial services, the good thing is we don't need a general AI. Okay, narrow AI is good enough. So I don't expect my financial advisor to be good in playing a piano. If he can give me or she can give me good financial advice, that's good enough. So that's good about, you know, the challenge for financial services and banks is to choose the right kind of applications and to build that trust in the customer. I think that's very important. So if the Netflix gives me a wrong recommendation, okay, I'll start the film and stop it halfway. But if my financial advisor is going to give wrong advice and I lose a lot of money, that's going to be, the implication is going to be very severe. So that's, what I see is it's already happening because the narrow AI, there's already a lot of applications. It's just for the financial services to figure out which, are going to be successful in terms of customer acceptance. I feel one thing that also that could be done is personalization of products, financial products. I think that's one area where, again, financial services can look into how do you personalize it for different people's requirements, because now it's usually standardized products, and maybe they personalize it for a group of people, but that personalization, I feel, is still not good enough. So that's one area. So I'm a bit more optimistic that in financial services, you will see a lot more of AI being used. And it's already being used, and it's just that the big banks, they struggle with their legacy systems and how to transform those legacy systems soon so that they can adopt these new technology is going to be a big challenge for them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've taken note of all of that and reporting back. Shawn.
Okay. So just now I spoke a lot about, not too much, about social and economic. And then I added in the biological, psychological environment, especially the natural environment, and how, I like Dr. Toti Kiat's comments about augmenting capabilities and human ability to sense and sense-make. And Professor Andy as well, where the human capacity is obviously lacking in many areas, where AI could definitely, most certainly augment. Collision control is one of them. Looking at the latest fighter jets, for example, the GSF, it's able to collate different sets of information and then sense-make and allow humans in the cockpit to give a better assessment of the battle situation is one of them. So what really is for government to balance this between the domains of what we need to balance and to sense-make is really to build a better social compact and to build strengthen the social contract that we have today. I mean, I'm among friends today from Jurong, who spend half of their lifetime serving communities and serving the country. Maurice, Guan Ming, Peng Tong, Chia Boon Tai. Francis just stepped away. Rajaram, and also my good friend here, Anton. And how can AI really enhance equality and social equity? Take, for example, the children today that grows up. There's very little information on how we can sense that in one aspect they are disadvantaged and advantaged. How can we improve outcomes for them? How can we enhance, not even from an equal opportunity perspective, but from the right opportunity? Can AI do that? The better understanding of our natural environment, to understand food and water security that is so basic as of today, energy, distribution, the advent of computing power, senses their ability and IoT from a human physical perspective, able to collect data that we never had before and continue to collect. How then can we better synthesize to build better climate outcomes? When Professor Venky talked about the financial sector, we work a lot on ex-inmates who come out. How can AI have, if I have a prayer and I were to wish for, I wish for an AI, a general AI in finance that has empathy, to ensure that the data sets that they have definitely will give them an extremely low credit score and was most certainly not improve loans. But how then can AI enhance outcomes for inmates when they leave on and move on with their second life? There is a continuum, today, from upstream to downstream collection of data and connectivity, and how can we better sense-make that? I like Dr. Tosi Kiat's example on teletext. I remember that very, very fondly as a small boy. back then, not many have access to the same information. I'm sure Guan Ming and Francis will be able to comment more on this, where back then, the trading floor for Forex, for derivatives, even for trading your shares, not everyone, the common man, had access to financial information. You had to call, pick up the phone, you had to call your broker, get instant rates, and the only information, unless you have a Bloomberg terminal or you are right there, a private trading desk, access to information is so rare. And teletext was that to give, in some ways, delayed or not, having access. It's just like equal access to social justice and the legal system. Even a paralegal, if armed with AI, can give equity to the people in that industry. I mean, Singapore will be doing a lot more in logistics, smart nation, education, healthcare, border security, and these things will be incremental, for sure. And AI will definitely get us to the next level. But within ourselves and within this room, the core thing is that how can we then bring AI to the next level, to bring social equity, to balance what the government is doing, build businesses that are responsible, giving individuals opportunities to lead a fulfilling and meaningful life, and to build communities that are diverse, cohesive, that's sustainable for our future. So with that, I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you. And to draw today to a conclusion, can I invite then our esteemed author to perhaps make some final comments and to sum up. Regrettably, we don't have time for questions from the floor, but I'm going to invite Anton to certainly thank our esteemed visitors as well. And you've got 3.5 minutes, Anton. Thank you.
I'll make it shorter. So I'm the last speaker, or last one to comment. So I think I'm going to take that opportunity to further sell AI, and maybe some of it might rebut my close friends here. But I will also support that with some facts. One, first of all, before I go to that, I must say this one thing. AI is already the great leveler, the great democratizer, and I'll say why that is. It's simple. Today, in remote areas, whether it be banking, whether it be healthcare, whether it be education, is enabled by two things: mobile phones and artificial intelligence. We can reach out to any part of the world today, any remote area, and deliver via drones the necessary drugs and treatments, even extremely remote areas. And they are doing banking also through their mobile phones. And they are also beginning to have education through their mobile phones. So clearly, AI has leveled and democratized the world. And that is a fact. It is already happening. Even at battlefields, even in Ukraine, many of the things happening are not just the traditional warfare, but actually through digital warfare. So AI has really democratized and leveled the world. Now, going forward, do we have a crystal ball? Certainly we don't. And that has been always the case. It's nothing new. But the point is, we can reflect on what we have experienced in the recent past, and then quite safely project what would happen in the next 3 to 5, 10 years from now. And that can be clearly substantiated. But without sounding overly optimistic, but I could safely say that we have already arrived at the ANI final stages. That's crystal clear. Now, and it is crystal clear for many reasons. As I said earlier on, AI does a better job than a pathologist, and it's evident. AI does a better job than a pharmacologist. AI is beating us in chess and any other game that you can name it. In the factories in Amazon, there are 2,000 robots working along with thousands of employees, and they do far better job. And they don't get tired. They don't need leaves. They don't go on vacation. They don't get COVID, So AI is here. We have arrived at it. It's an integral part of us. It is impacting, and the future remains bright, except for a couple of minor things. One is privacy, individual liberties. We are experiencing that now. You look at the social platform, the deep fake. So that's one thing to address, and it's left to people like MC Shawn and others to address that. So it's about privacy, it's about ethical behavior, and the proper guidelines, as Professor Venky highlighted, in terms of banking and law and stuff. So privacy, ethical issues, and security will remain a major issue that needs to be handled very quickly, because generally it falls behind technology. There's a lag time, and they really need to do the work. And technology travels extremely fast compared to legislation and laws and regulations, privacy and ethics and stuff. They are lagging behind. That needs to be addressed swiftly. And in the era of AI and huge penetration of devices, 30 billion and growing, one key problem is the security. And there are two forms of it, predominantly. One of them we all know very well. It's the ransomware, the phishing and stuff. But frankly, that's not huge. That's trivial compared to the ones that can attack our national grids of power supply, gas lines, water supplies, etc., which can be hugely dangerous. And it can be easily done in today's with AI. Of course, AI also provides us counter mechanisms that is much faster than a security expert can handle, because the ability to detect any malfunction, any anomalies is far superior. So how do we deal with it? Is to deploy AI more and more, and that's the only way forward. Thank you.
Anton, thank you so much. To sum up then, I think it's fair to say that our panellists would agree that AI is here to help. Must always be remembered there is a human dimension to anything. There are issues around security. There are issues around the application of AI in terms of learning, educational philosophies, educational means, its application in manufacturing, in space technology, in the law, in healthcare. All of these, I think, are areas where over the next 5 to 10 years, from what we've heard from our panellists, the application of AI is going to play a significant role. It already does, but what it'll also mean is it will fall to governments to ensure that the application of AI does not disenfranchise, is there for the good of humankind, and where necessary, notwithstanding my friend's comments to the right, on occasions it might be necessary for governments to step in. So I'd like to thank all of our panellists. I'd particularly like to thank our two guests who have beamed in from overseas. We very much appreciate you taking the time out to be with us today. We thank you for your commentary. We thank you for your contribution as guest authors. And to Anton, finally, from my perspective, when he set out to write this book, I thought, this is the latest in a long list of things that my good friend Anton sets his mind to, and he has certainly not disappointed. As I said in my comments a little earlier, this is a book that must be read. It is a book that must be learned from, and I think it sets the foundations for going forward. So Anton, again, congratulations to you, and I'll hand back now to our MC to formally wrap up proceedings.
Friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we started this afternoon with 3 rounds of applause. Let's also wrap up this afternoon with 3 rounds of applause. The first round of applause can we give to our excellent panel, moderated by Professor Stephen, Mr. Shawn, Huang, Dr. Anton, Professor Andy, Professor Liz, Dr. To, and Professor Venky. Can we give them a big round of applause, please? The second round of applause is to everybody in the audience, as well as our backstage crew. Your presence here today has made the book launch of Will AI Dictate the Future a resounding success. Thank you very much for being here. And last but not least, again, I'll leave the last moment for Dr. Anton Ravindran. Thank you, Dr. Anton, for bringing us all together, for sharing your mind, your book, as well as your heart, because again, all proceeds of the author royalties will go towards the Singapore Cancer Society. So I'd like to get everybody to please purchase the book. The gentlemen in front that have kindly given the book to us, the books are gone, you need to buy another one. Yeah. So let's make sure we all get a copy of the book and get Dr. Anton to sign off, because right after this, I think he'll be there for the book signing as well. So ladies and gentlemen, to Dr. Anton Ravindran. With that, we've come to the end of the book launch. Will AI Dictate the Future? Do take care. My name is Ricardo. On behalf of everybody involved, goodbye.